Hi everyone, welcome to GGN. This is the second part for today for Monday the 24th of March 2014. My website is ggnonline.net and this is the only channel here on YouTube, DJarko 2013. Thank you for subscribing if you have, or thumbs up. I don't see as many comments as I used to, I kind of missed that, but either way, thanks for tuning in here. I have some interesting articles, mostly Ukraine, Russia in this video. Ukrainian TV boss assaulted and forced to resign by the far-right party. At least this is what we're told, but this is from Euronews.com. It's kind of like Reuters. The head of Ukraine's state TV company has been attacked by at least 3 MPs from the far right. They were angry that the public broadcaster had broadcasted the Russian parliament signing a treaty with Crimea on Tuesday. Lastly, it says the men accused him of serving Putin while there were Ukrainians dying at the hands of Russian occupiers and called him Moscow trash. So, and like I've already mentioned, I've already covered this recently, that that under this leadership of the new party, whatever, in Ukraine, the new leadership, they've already said they're going to join the EU, nationalizing Russian companies, but there was supposedly gold being sent over to the U.S. or possibly Germany. And yeah, they're going to get an IMF loan. So they're just going along the lines. If these people are, nationalists, they're not doing a very good job as far as protecting their national interests, because they're just going to be enslaved from one trading bloc to the next. That's why I said this in the beginning, what was it, a week or two ago, that these people, I don't think that they are nationalists at all. And it seems to be that that's the case here. Basically, they have these bankers use these people to gain power. So, I mean, they're not even really in power yet. So, U.S. and EU call on Ukrainian neo-Nazis that ditched the swastika. So, EU and the U.S., which have supported and funded for years all neo-Nazi groups and other radical extremist factions in Eastern Europe, have, at least that's what they say, have given the order to these new fascists never to brandish the swastika. So, it says here that the Western mainstream press can now present them today as fighters for democracy in the face of Russian invasion. Another point that I was making before was about how these nationalists are being taken for a ride. They're being duped. They're being used by certain factions, the globalists, whatever. And the biggest opposition to the globalists would be Russia. And so this is a big stab at Russia. This is a video in Germany. Ukrainian nationalists are being used by the EU, says Nick Griffin.
Now by globalists, Zionists, the European Union, they're not in the least bit interested in Ukrainian freedom. They're interested in using Ukrainian nationalism as a way of attacking Russia and provoking Russia so that they can continue with the Project for a New American Century campaign to hem Russia in and to destroy Russia, and in particular to destroy Putin. Balance of leftists, capitalists, and Zionist group of nationalists start saying, we want to be part of the European Union, we want to be part of NATO. They cease, in my eyes, to be nationalists. They've crossed a red line and they're in the wrong. I wouldn't want to fight them, but I would urge them to wake up and smell the coffee and understand that NATO and the EU aren't interested in protecting the rights of Ukraine. They want to loot the Ukraine. They want oligarchs to be allowed to loot the Ukraine, and they want to use it as a stepping stone to attack Russia.
Say what you will about the guy's politics or his views. That idea, though, is I don't see it really being spoken of, right, in public. Did the U.S. government pay for violence in the Ukraine? Well, this former U.S. intelligence officer, Scott Rickard, says yes. He says the U.S. dupes people angry at injustice into violent unrest to further its interests. Lastly, we've covered this before from Land Destroyer report. National Endowment for Democracy has over 50 NGOs operating in Ukraine, and the U.S. taxpayers are basically paying for this program through, USAID, another program. And Russia's defense minister on Monday inspected troops and military facilities in Crimea. So they visited Crimea as Ukraine orders military withdrawal. He said in the last days, a group of officers have been checking and making sure there's no interim stage or anarchy, making sure that the military hardware does not fall into the best hands. I don't know what that means, but Crimea adopts Russian ruble as official currency. The Russian currency, the ruble, has become the official currency of Crimea. White House says that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is possible. They're pushing for aid. We know about the sanctions war, but UK government is hyping this threat of a Russian invasion. Yeah, they're trying to escalate the sanctions war with Russia by saying, Russian troops are massing near the border, and this is as Russia has repeatedly promised not to cross into eastern Ukraine. Next up, we have NATO commander fears Russia can run to Moldova as Moscow seizes new Crimea bases we just talked about. On Sunday, Ukraine's Western-backed leaders voiced fears of an imminent Russian invasion of the industrial heartland as NATO's top commander warned of a very sizable Russian troop presence on Ukraine's eastern border. The aim of Putin is not Crimea, but all of Ukraine as troops massed at the border ready to attack at any moment, Ukraine's national security defense chief said. Okay, then we have this girl. I just covered her about how she was actually thrown into jail, and then as soon as this transition or coup d'etat regime change took place, she was let loose. Now she's talking. What does she say? I will raise world to reduce Russia to ashes. In a leaked phone call, supposedly by RT, so you have to take this as what it is, right? Did she say this or didn't she? But she said there that Ukrainians must take up arms against Russians so that not even scorched earth will be left where Russia stands. This is a person who got kicked out by the Ukrainian people. She is one of the richest gas barons in Ukraine. It's going too far, bugger. We must grab our arms and go whack those damn cat saps, a Ukrainian word they used to refer to Russians in a negative tone. So she's just playing off nationalistic tones so that she can get hold of her own financial strategic interests. So again, just playing the people, exploiting this. NATO agenda is targeting the Russian border territory, says an analyst. It says, I'm afraid we're seeing right now, what we're seeing is the end game, if you will, of 20 years of NATO expansion, actually 15 years of NATO expansion beginning in 1999. So they've had a full-fledged war in Asia, Afghanistan, Africa against Libya, and little other places, smaller ones like Somalia and that. Naval operations in the Mediterranean, the Arabian Sea, and Indian Ocean. Says, in fact, they've become a global military force dominated by the United States. Lastly, its members and partners have encroached not only on the Russian border, but on the borders of Iran and China as well. I'm going to throw this in there. What we're seeing right now is the final push by the United States and its major NATO allies to push this military bloc, unprecedented in history in terms of size and scope, right up to the Russian border, up to 1,500 some odd kilometers, whereby Ukrainian borders with Russia. This is from the Globe and Mail, coming out of, I believe, England. The NATO alliance's top commander in Europe pushed already sky-high tensions. He said at a conference in Brussels that Russia has massed a large and battle-ready military force along its border with Ukraine. So again, this is just backing up what we said. He's just fanning the flames, right? And then you have to look at those places that were mentioned, Afghanistan, Libya, or Iraq. Those were kind of seen as failures, but were they? Or were they successes, right? Everyone talk about oil, but the success was that they just basically obliterated any unity or any form of resistance towards them. Russian politicians suggest dividing Ukraine along the lines of Nazi-Soviet pact and proposes West Ukrainian referendum. Talking about a nationalist and basically people that aren't globalist being used, in playing off sentiment like that Russian billionaire, the female one. It says here, it's been a while since a well-known Russian nationalist and spotlight-grabbing politician Vladimir Zhirinovsky made headlines. He says here that he's back and has a, quote, modest proposal for Ukraine. So they said he's been a bit of a loose cannon, but goes on and says, before readers dismiss his ramblings as a deranged lunatic, it's worth reminding that he's a deputy speaker at the Duma, and his ideas and language resonate with a large part of the Russian population and the Kremlin's increasingly pro-nationalistic rhetoric. Russia retaliates and basically slaps sanctions on 13 Canadian officials. Russia's foreign minister says it's a response to the unacceptable action by the Canadian side that has inflicted serious damage to bilateral relations. Russia also raised the gas price for Ukraine, demanding $11 billion in back payments. Moscow had agreed to give a $100 discount to Ukraine for is that it? For natural gas back in 2010 when it renewed its lease. However, Russia now considers Crimea to be part of its territory, believes that it is no longer obliged to offer Ukraine discounted gas. So, Obama demands Russia leave the G8. So, what does Russia say? Russia is not clinging to G8 if West does not want it. It says it's an informal club. No one gives out membership cards and no one can expel members, Lavrov told the media. If our Western partners believe that this format has exhausted itself, let it be. We are not clinging to it. So Obama, the peaceful Democrat, right, canceled the June summit. And Obama declares that he can freeze the assets of American citizens who threaten his foreign policy. It's an executive order to seize the property of his political enemies. It says Crimea just voted over 95% to break away from the Ukraine and join Russia, yet the Obama regime is demanding that Crimea remain part of the Ukraine. It says that any U.S. citizen doing business in Crimea is in imminent danger of having Obama seize his property. So it declares that anyone who constitutes an unusual threat to foreign policy can have their assets froze. So who determines that? But it says here if he can get away with this, he can start seizing anyone's property for any reason. UK better watch out with what they say. You know, the UK views Russia more positively than the EU. They may bring in that same policy, executive order. British citizens view Russia more favorably than the European Union, a new survey says. So something's going on behind closed doors. Who knows? But probably has to do with what the individual was saying about the new Project for a New American Century and the Zionist Lindsey Graham, who I definitely believe is part of that clique, is caught on hot mic offering John Kerry some help. So this was March 13th. You've probably already seen this. So he's approaching Kerry and congratulating him on his testimony. He also offered to help with Speaker John Boehner over opposition to the Senate's version of the proposed aid package for Ukraine. We know John Kerry, Skull and Bones. We know he represents that part of the group, and so they could make people do what they want, right? Is Lindsey Graham a compromised homosexual? Sounds pretty crazy, but I didn't know. I don't really care about the guy's personal life, but it's I guess it's being used against him to blackmail him to do stuff like that. One thing I didn't know, Lindsey Graham made a name for himself by attacking Bill Clinton. His reputation for being hard on Clinton propelled him from the House to the Senate, yet once in the Senate he became a big government leftist and champion of open borders. I don't know if he became a leftist, he just kind of became a neocon and a globalist. One-time foes, Bill Clinton and John McCain. Are they really foes? Or is it like that South Park episode after the after the elections where Obama won? Either way, they're able to bury the hatchet over Ukraine, so they agree. So speaking of Mr. Clinton, Bill Clinton, former president, 15 years on, looking back at NATO's humanitarian bombing of Yugoslavia. So hopefully this won't happen to the Ukrainian people or in that area. Could you be rest assured, your buddies, the EU, that you just getting ready to join and all that, they will leave you there in a hellhole. And then once all the, quote, terrorists start flooding in from their other operations like Libya and Syria, then they'll start dropping bombs on you. It's the first time that NATO used military force without the approval of the UN Security Council and against a sovereign nation that did not pose a real threat to any member of the alliance. It demonstrated in '99 that it can do whatever it wants under the guise of humanitarian intervention, the war on terror, or preventative war. Speaking of a Western puppet, Saakashvili, summoned last week to face questions over the death of his predecessor, ex-president, rejects a return to Georgia. And China is outraged by the behavior of the Obama family. Obama, her daughter, her mother-in-law are on taxpayer-paid mega vacation. Chinese hotel staff are raging about the obnoxious, spoiled brat behavior of Obama's mother-in-law. Like this, $8,350 per night Beijing presidential suite. Staff member says that the entourage has inconvenienced pretty much everyone and made the whole hotel staff fed up. They said that the mother-in-law was barking at the staff since she arrived. Lastly, a study says Obama's the most well-traveled, expensive president in history through 5 years. Thank you.